What if the reason you failed to break your bad habits isn't a lack of willpower, but a complete misunderstanding of how change actually works? Most people attack their bad habits like they're going to war. They wake up one Monday morning, declare that everything changes today, and commit to a brutal overhaul of their entire lifestyle. They quit sugar cold turkey, sign up for a 6 a.m. gym membership, delete social media, and swear off Netflix, all in the same week. For about 4 days, they feel like a new person. By day 10, they're back on the couch eating chips, wondering what's wrong with them. Nothing is wrong with them. The strategy was wrong. There is a different way, one that has quietly powered Japan's rise from post-war rubble to one of the world's most productive, disciplined, and innovative societies. It doesn't demand heroic effort. It doesn't require you to overhaul your identity overnight. It asks only for one thing, one small, almost embarrassingly tiny improvement every single day. That philosophy is called Kaizen, and it might be the most underestimated self-improvement system in the world. The brain doesn't like big change. Before diving into Kaizen as a system, it's important to understand why big, dramatic change almost always fails, because it's not a matter of character. It's biology. The human brain is, at its core, a survival machine. It is wired to conserve energy, avoid uncertainty, and protect the status quo. When you try to make a massive behavioral shift all at once, your brain registers it as a threat. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, activates. Stress hormones flood your system, and your mind starts generating every possible reason why the change is too hard, too inconvenient, or not worth it. Psychologists call this change resistance. It is the internal mechanism that makes you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, or anxious when you attempt to do something radically different from your norm. It's not laziness. It is your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect you from the unfamiliar. Kaizen works with the brain rather than against it. By breaking change into steps so small they barely register as change at all, Kaizen flies under the radar of the brain's alarm system. The amygdala doesn't fire. The stress response stays quiet. And the behavior, tiny as it is, gets done. Do it enough times, and something remarkable happens. The behavior becomes automatic. Small is not weak. Small is strategic. There's a cultural bias, particularly in Western societies, toward the grand gesture. We celebrate massive transformations. We're inspired by the person who lost 100 pounds, quit a 20-year addiction overnight, or went from broke to millionaire. These stories make for great content. They make for terrible templates. What we rarely see is the mountain of failed attempts, the years of behind-the-scenes grinding, or the invisible daily habits that actually produced those results. The dramatic moment was just the visible tip of an enormous iceberg of small, consistent actions. Kaizen reframes the relationship between effort and outcome. It asks, what is the smallest possible action I could take right now that moves me even 1 degree in the right direction? This sounds almost patronizing until you do the math. If you improve by just 1% every day for a year, you don't end up 365% better. You end up approximately 37 times better. That's the power of compounding. The same principle that makes compound interest in finance so powerful, applied to human behavior and skill. Conversely, if you decline by 1% every day, you decay to nearly 0. The math cuts both ways. And this is exactly how bad habits work. They don't destroy you in one dramatic moment. They erode you by 1% every single day until the damage becomes impossible to ignore. Kaizen applied to bad habits. the core framework. Breaking a bad habit with Kaizen is not about elimination through force. It's about replacement through incremental redirection. Here's how the system works in practice. Step 1. Audit without judgment. The first step is radical honesty. You cannot change what you haven't clearly defined. Most people have a vague, guilty sense of their bad habits but have never actually sat down to examine them with precision. Kaizen asks you to observe your habit like a scientist, not a judge. Don't attach shame or self-criticism to it. Simply notice. When does the habit occur? What triggers it? A time of day, an emotion, a person, a location? What need does it fulfill? Comfort, stimulation, avoidance, reward? What does it cost you? In time, health, money, relationships, self-respect? This isn't about beating yourself up. It's about gathering data. A factory engineer using Kaizen doesn't blame the machine for malfunctioning. He observes the process, identifies the breakdown point, and adjusts accordingly. You are doing the same thing with your own behavior. Step 2. Identify the micro-entry point. Once you understand the habit, Kaizen asks you to find the smallest possible entry point for change. Not the ideal change. Not the complete solution. Just the tiniest imaginable first step. If you want to stop scrolling on your phone before bed, the Kaizen approach doesn't say, put your phone in another room starting tonight. It says, move your phone just 6 inches further from your bed tonight. That's it. 6 inches. It sounds ridiculous. It also works because it creates movement. The 6-inch shift costs you nothing psychologically. It meets zero resistance. But it begins to break the unconscious routine. Tomorrow, maybe it moves a foot. Next week, maybe to the nightstand. Next month, out of the room. The key is that each step must feel almost too easy. If it feels like a challenge, it's too big. Shrink it. Step 3. Stack the tiny change onto an existing behavior. One of the most powerful Kaizen techniques for habit change is called habit stacking, attaching a new tiny behavior to an existing one that you already do automatically. Want to stop mindlessly opening the fridge when you're bored? Stack a 5-second pause onto the behavior. Every time your hand reaches for the fridge handle, you pause and take one conscious breath before opening it. That's all. One breath. That single breath creates a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap, conscious choice becomes possible. Over time, that gap grows. The automatic nature of the habit begins to loosen. This is Kaizen in its purest neurological form. You are not destroying the habit. You are inserting a wedge into its automatic sequence, giving your prefrontal cortex, the rational, decision-making part of your brain, enough time to show up before the behavior completes itself. Step 4. Celebrate the micro-win. Here is where most people miss a critical piece of the puzzle. The brain needs positive reinforcement to encode new behavior. Every time you complete even the smallest Kaizen action, that 6-inch phone move, that one conscious breath, that single push-up instead of a full workout, you must acknowledge it. Not with grand fanfare. Just with a genuine internal recognition. I did that. That was progress. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman and behavioral researcher B.J. Fogg both point to the same finding. The brain releases a small burst of dopamine not just from achieving big goals, but from the feeling of making progress. When you celebrate micro-wins, you are literally conditioning your brain to associate the new behavior with reward. This is how good habits form. And, worked in reverse, it's how bad habits lose their grip, because the old behavior stops being the most reliable source of reward. Real-life application. 5 common bad habits, dissolved with Kaizen 1. Chronic phone addiction. The Kaizen approach doesn't start with screen time limits or app blockers. It starts with one conscious moment of awareness per day. Set a single reminder that asks, "Am I on my phone right now by choice or by compulsion?" That's it. One question. Once a day. For the first week. The question plants a seed of metacognition, awareness of your own awareness. Over the following weeks, you increase the frequency of that question. Then you begin to add tiny friction. The 6-inch move becomes a room away. The room away becomes off during meals. Each step is only added when the previous one feels completely natural. 2. Emotional eating. Emotional eating is almost never about hunger. It is a coping mechanism for discomfort, anxiety, boredom, loneliness, frustration. Kaizen doesn't ask you to stop eating emotionally overnight. It asks you to insert a 60-second delay between the emotional trigger and the food. 60 seconds. When the urge to eat hits and you know it's not true hunger, you set a phone timer for 60 seconds. You can still eat after. You're not being denied. You're just waiting. In those 60 seconds, you breathe. You notice what emotion is present. You don't have to fix it. Just notice it. Over time, weeks, not days, that 60 seconds becomes 2 minutes. 2 minutes becomes a conversation with yourself. That conversation becomes a choice. And slowly, the grip of emotional eating loosens, not because you forced it away, but because you gave yourself enough space to see it clearly. 3. Procrastination. Procrastination is rooted in a fear response, specifically, the anxiety of imperfection, overwhelm, or failure. The brain avoids starting because starting makes the potential for failure real. The Kaizen cure for procrastination is beautifully simple. The 2-minute rule with a twist. You commit to working on the dreaded task for exactly 2 minutes. Not until it's done. Not until you feel motivated. Just 2 minutes. But here's the Kaizen addition. After those 2 minutes, you ask yourself, can I do 1 more minute? Just 1. Not 10. Not until the project is finished. 1 minute. Most of the time, you can. And you do. And before you realize what happened, you've been working for 30 minutes. Not because you forced yourself, but because you tricked your brain into starting, and momentum took over. Starting is always the hardest part. Kaizen makes starting cost almost nothing. 4. Negative self-talk. Negative self-talk is one of the most destructive habits humans engage in, and it's also one of the most invisible, because it happens inside the mind, where no one can see it and where most people have never been taught to observe it. The Kaizen approach begins with a single daily practice. Notice one instance of negative self-talk each day and simply label it. Not challenge it. Not replace it with forced positivity. Just label it. That was a critical thought about myself. That label is the gap. That label is the beginning of distance between you and the thought. Over weeks, you begin to notice more instances. You start asking, is this thought true? Eventually, you begin to author more compassionate replacement thoughts, not because you were told to think positive, but because you spent months learning to see the pattern clearly enough to choose differently. 5. Sedentary lifestyle. If you hate the gym and hate exercise, don't start with the gym. Start with standing up once per hour. That's your entire fitness revolution for week 1. Once per hour, stand up. Walk to the kitchen. Walk to the window. Sit back down. Week 2,
You add a 5-breath stretching sequence every time you stand. Week 3, 10 bodyweight squats every other time you stand. By month 3, you are doing more daily movement than most people who claim to work out twice a week, and you barely registered it as exercise because each step felt natural before the next one was added. Kaizen doesn't just build habits. It builds identity. By the time you're doing 10 squats every hour, you're starting to think of yourself as someone who moves. And people do what's consistent with who they believe they are. The compound effect of Kaizen. Why patience is the superpower. The most difficult part of Kaizen is not the small steps. It's the patience. We live in a culture of instant results. We want the transformation visible in 30 days, the body changed in 60, the life overhauled by the new year. When Kaizen doesn't produce dramatic visible results in the first few weeks, people abandon it, not realizing they are standing at the edge of the exponential curve, just before the dramatic upturn. Think of a bamboo plant. When you plant bamboo, it shows no visible growth for the first 4 years. Nothing above the soil. Underground, however, it is building a root system so deep and extensive that when it finally breaks the surface in year 5, it grows up to 90 feet in 6 weeks. Your habits work the same way. The early weeks of Kaizen feel invisible. But underground, inside your neural pathways, your automatic behavioral patterns, your emotional responses, a new root system is forming. When it breaks the surface, the growth will feel sudden. But it was never sudden. It was always the compound interest of invisible, consistent effort. This is why people who practice Kaizen successfully share one defining trait. They measure consistency, not results. They do not ask, "Am I thinner yet? Am I richer yet? Am I healthier yet?" They ask, "Did I do my small thing today?" And when the answer is yes, day after day, week after week, the results become inevitable.
The Kaizen mindset, process over perfection. Underlying the entire Kaizen philosophy is a shift in mindset that is perhaps its most powerful and lasting gift. The move from outcome orientation to process orientation. Outcome-oriented people judge themselves by results. When the results are slow or absent, they feel like failures. They quit. Process-oriented people judge themselves by consistency. When they show up and do their small thing, even imperfectly, even in a diminished form, they feel successful. They continue. This is not mere positive thinking. It is a fundamentally different relationship with effort and time. The outcome-oriented person needs external validation to keep going. The process-oriented person is fueled entirely by the internal satisfaction of showing up. Kaizen builds this mindset by design. Because the steps are so small, you can always do something, even on your worst day. Even when you are sick, exhausted, overwhelmed, or grieving. Maybe your daily step today is 10% of what it normally is. That's fine. That 10% still counts. The streak continues. The identity holds. And this is ultimately what separates people who permanently break bad habits from those who stay trapped in cycles of failure. Not talent, not intelligence, not willpower, but the quiet, relentless willingness to keep showing up in whatever form that's available today. A final word. You don't need to be radical. You need to be consistent. The world is full of radical promises. 30-day challenges. Complete transformations. New year, new you. These promises sell because they appeal to the desperate, exhausted part of us that wants the pain to stop right now. But the most reliable path out of any bad habit isn't the dramatic exit. It's the slow, methodical, almost boring process of choosing differently, just slightly, one more time. Kaizen doesn't ask you to be extraordinary. It asks you to be 1% better than you were yesterday. To move the phone 6 inches further. To wait 60 seconds. To stand up once an hour. To notice one negative thought. To work for 2 minutes on the thing you've been avoiding. These are not impressive actions. They will not earn you applause or social media followers. But done consistently, day after day, compounded over months and years, they will quietly, steadily, and permanently reshape who you are. The Japanese didn't rebuild their entire manufacturing economy overnight after World War II. They improved one small thing every single day until the compound result shocked the world. You can do the same with the habits that have been holding you back. Not tomorrow. Not after you feel ready. One tiny step. Right now. That's all it ever takes.